Hi everybody, hope you're well. Thank you for joining me today. I know that when you first start wire wrapping, you might be a little anxious to do a project that you can finish and have something wearable when you're done as a result, just to give yourself a little confidence boost, and because that's the whole point, is to make something that's wearable that you can give away, that you're able to finish. So we're going to start our first project now that we've covered the essential things that you need to get started. Hopefully you have some tools to work with. If not, do the best you can. But what we're going to be making is probably the most basic wire pendant that you can make. And it's made with a any shape of tumbled stone. Let's talk about stone choices. Something like this that you pick up on the beach will work fine. Something like this, which I bought at a local, kind of like a new age store. She has lots of tumbled rocks. This is a citrine. So I bought this. I think I only paid a couple dollars for this. And that works great. As a matter of fact, this is the one we're going to start with. Some things that I don't recommend is anything like this. This is actually a moonstone, a chunk. But this is a raw piece, and it has rough edges. They're actually pretty sharp. So, and this as well, this is a black tourmaline. This also is kind of sharp on the edges and a little bit pokey. And the two of these are kind of blocky and square, which is going to make them harder to work with anyway. So if you have things like that, I recommend keep them in a dish on a table, because they work a little better for that than they do for jewelry. But something like this, see, this rock is kind of, this I just picked up at the beach, so it's been worn by the sand and by the water. And it's kind of smooth, but it also is kind of flat, so that makes it a little bit easier to handle versus something that's completely round like a golf ball. That would be a little more difficult. So make it easy on yourself. Pick something that is easy to wrap and that is easy to work with. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, this is a pretty simple project. It only uses 20 gauge wire. So for mine, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use two 12-inch pieces of wire. And you'll find that it's not real technical. This is meant to be a free-form kind of project. So there's not a lot of measuring. There's not a lot of technical stuff to it, which makes it great for a beginner, because when you're first starting, you know, you want it to be easy and not too many rules and not too many things you have to think about. So this is a good place to start. And I see a lot of these on, I see them on Etsy and Facebook and in groups and things like that. And, you know, they're not meant to be perfect, but at the same time, you don't want to beat the daylights out of them either. You know, it should still look like wire when it's finished. You know, I also see some that I question the stability. You know, so make sure that you're using a wire that's heavy enough to hold your stone. I wouldn't recommend anything bigger than 20 gauge, just because it gets hard to work with. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the first twist in the wire. All right, so the way I do that is I cross the two pieces of wire, and then with your non-dominant hand, of course, if you're left-handed, this will all be backwards for you, and I apologize for that. Because I can't show you left-handed, I can only show you right-handed, because I don't do things left-handed very well. So anyway, so for me and all of us right-handed folks, we're going to hold the wire in our left hand. Okay, but what you want to do is make sure you have a good grip on it. You're going to cross these over, and then how I like to do this so that I get a nice tight twist is I sort of bend over my index finger and I put it in here like this and get it nice and close, and then I hold the rest of the wire. Not so much with my fingertips, but back here further in my hand. So after I do the first twist, I'll show you. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to twist this wire together. And it needs to be fairly tight or it won't stay. Okay, so I'm holding it. Let me turn the whole thing over. I'm holding it down here with these fingers, as opposed to trying to hold it up here, but I'm putting some pressure on it with this part of my finger. You can kind of see this is a, got to be brave, got to be tough, get your finger in there, put some pressure on it. Try to hold on to that so that your twist stays nice and tight. Okay, and then from there, the idea is to give the bottom of your stone, and it doesn't matter which you use for the top and which you use for the bottom, but the idea is to give that bottom part of your stone a little place to rest. So we want it to be not big enough to fall through, but big enough to let that bottom have a little space. Okay, so you kind of have to fuss around with this a little bit and keep checking it. This is the fiddly part, the bottom part. Once you get this going, it goes pretty quickly. It's fairly easy to do, provided you start out in a good direction. So that looks like about what we need. So again, same process. And you'll figure out which wire has to be on top after you do your first twist. You'll know, and then it has to continue the same way. If you're gonna use your right hand and twist in a forward motion, then your bottom wire is the one that needs to be on top when you crisscross. Otherwise, you're going to have to go around a second time. So we're just going to give that a twist. And every time you twist, you want to check it, because if you go too far, you can't really go back. So at this point, if it was wrong, I could still fix it, but a few wraps in, I'm stuck. Okay, so that's going to give me just a little space where this can rest. Kind of gives it a little seat. It's like, a swing or a little bench to sit on. Now, the idea with this is that you've twisted your wires together. So now, as you go up, you're going to twist these two and these two, the two back ones. So you're going to twist the front side and the back side together. And then your next twist, you never twist the same two wires together. It's always alternating. So you're going to twist these two, and then these two, and then these two, and then these two. If you twist the same wires together twice, you're going to have a big spot where your stone could potentially pop out. So that's a mistake that I see being made a lot. I think when people get to a certain point, they don't quite know what to do, and so they're a little confused. They get a little lost. So that's how you avoid that. Make sure that you're only twisting the same wires together one time, and then you're alternating. So the next twist is going to land on the front of the stone and the back of the stone. So you kind of want to just get an idea of where you want it to sit. And again, it's all freeform. There's no specific plan for this. There's no way that you have to do it. So keep it casual. And this is, like I said, this is the part where it's kind of fiddly. It's hard to hold on to. That's normal. You could, if you really wanted to, you could tape your stone with painter's tape right into the frame at this point, but it does make the wire a little bit harder to twist, because what I'm going to do is take my stone right out of here. Okay, I see where I need to be, and I've actually crossed those in the wrong direction, so I'm going to switch them around. Okay, and you put your twist. And at this point, you don't need to go around more than a couple times. If for some reason you like the twisted look and you want to go up further with it, that's fine. You can certainly do that. There are reasons to do that if you're going to add other elements later on. But for this, it doesn't really matter. Simple, easy. Don't get too caught up in perfection or symmetry at this point. This is meant to be freeform. It's meant to be easy. It's meant to be comfortable and artsy and fun. So that's a good spot for that one. So again, I'm going to pinch it with my left hand and twist it with my right. And just open it back out. Okay, now at this point you want to make sure that everything here is where you want it to be, because what's going to happen is we're reaching a point where you're sort of going to come up over this shoulder area of the stone, let's call it. And once you come over that, you can't take your stone out anymore. So you need to make sure before you lock it in place and secure it that everything is where you want it to be. So for me, both sides look pretty good. These don't really have a front and a back. If you do them correctly, they should be wearable from either side. There's my little helper in the background. You'll hear him a lot in these videos. He's home with me all the time. Okay, so when you get that adjusted to where you want it to be, see, I've come just up over this rounded edge, so I know that's going to hold my stone in place. So now I'm holding it, I can hold it back further against the stone and give it a good twist. Okay, and now that stone's not going to come out of there again.
Upside down.
Okay, and on this side, same thing. And again, these are pretty tight, but that keeps the wraps neat. Okay, and now this wire can sort of be adjusted where you weren't able to do that necessarily before. Now that we know exactly how the stone is going to sit in here and it's locked in place, you can play with those a little bit. So your very last wrap at the top, your last twist at the top, is going to bring all of these together. Now there's, you know, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm just going to use some pliers and try to get this to lean over a little bit better the way I like it. Don't kill your fingers if you don't have to. And this is pretty much right at the very center of the top. Now keep in mind too, if you have a really odd shaped stone like this one was, you want to make sure that you think about where you want your bail to be, where you want your cord to go through, so that it hangs the way you want it to hang. Obviously, if I were to have placed the bail over here and tried to hang it, it probably wouldn't look great or balanced or correct. So even though if you look at the way the bottom of this piece is, it doesn't exactly line up with the bail, but the weight of it is balanced. So kind of just imagine your center line from the middle of the top to the middle of what you want the bottom to be, and kind of balance, you know, just in your mind, sort of balance on each side so that it looks even when you put it on and wear it. This one actually is my daughter's, which I was supposed to do, I don't know, a year and a half ago, and I just did it yesterday, so she's like the cobbler's child who has no shoes. But yeah, so try to think about balance as you're going along and how you want it to hang. And then when you get to the very top, I'm going to do this last wrap in here, and they don't always end perfectly in the center at the top, and you may have to kind of fool with this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is cross these wires over, and instead of doing a last twist back on itself like I had been doing, what I'm going to do is come around. I want to come around the other twist. And this is not, we're going to have to go back this way with this guy. And what we're doing is building a little neck sort of thing here with these wires, because they have to get tucked in, they have to go somewhere, and we want the bail to be really stable. So I'm going to just wrap these around and sort of cover that twisted area. Now you may have to, depending on where you finish on this, this one actually worked out about the same way. But you may have to do a twist on that piece of wire and then run it up and wrap it around. That's fine. There's no rules with this. So, and then what I recommend is these two are going to be my bail wires. Okay, so I want to bring those up and get them out of the way, because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim these guys off. You don't need any more of this. So when you're going to trim wires, make sure you're trimming the right wires. So get the wrong wires out of the way. And then I'm just going to use the flush cutters. Now get in the habit of, every time you clip a wire off, see, it leaves that pokey little end on there. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. So I like to use these micro chain nose pliers and just pull that around. You're going to kind of give it the direction you want it to go, get it started, and then press it down. Okay, now you don't need to use a great amount of force to do this, just enough to bend the wire, and then run your finger back over that spot. If you can feel the end of the wire, you need to keep pressing it down until you're not feeling it anymore. Just in case, I mean, we're going to wrap over the top of this, but, you know, get in the habit of finishing your wires properly. And now this one, just kind of feel where it sits in, trim it off, and then the same thing. Press it down and smooth it out until you can't feel it anymore. And you know what you can do is you can use your pliers and sort of, if you use the plier to kind of twist that wire and press it down at the same time, you'll find that you have a much better finish on your wire ends, of, you know, as far as tucking them in. Okay, because we're tightening this whole spiral. This whole, if you were to think of it looking down from the top, that wire now is in a spiral up on top of the other wire. So what you're doing is, if you trim that wire off and you twist and press at the same time, you're tightening that whole spiral, which gives you, it's a little more integrity for the piece overall. And now we're just gonna flatten up these wires here, and we're gonna get ready to make the bail. So the first thing that we do is take these wires and bend them back. Doing this straight up and down is going to give you a funny looking bail, and you don't want that. So bend these back, because you're going to need, you'll see it'll fit right in, but you need a place for that circle to start, and this gives it a good start. And then take your trusty colored pencil or whatever you're using to make your bail, and I hold it with my thumb so that it doesn't lose the shape. And what I'm going to do with this, just because this is a super simple bail and it's not getting any weaving on it, and I want it to be stable, so I'm going to cross these over each other. And that's going to, I didn't do it on this piece and I don't like it as much. That's what the back would have been, and this is the front. And I'm crossing these ones over because I want it to be stable. I don't want it to move around. I don't want it to ever open up. So it's a little cross. It's not going to be noticeable later on. Okay, and then when you go to do your wrap, leave it right on the pencil so that the bail doesn't get pulled out of shape. And you're going to take that wire, and now we're wrapping over the other wires going the opposite direction. So now we're going down toward the stone, where before we were going up. Okay. Like I said, it's not meant to be perfect, so you're going to have gaps in the wire. This wire is going to fill in some of that. but it's not supposed to be 100% perfect. Okay, when you get to you have this last little tail hanging out at the back. What I want to do with these, because these are now the top wires, these are the ones that if any wire was going to come off, it would be these. Okay, and we don't want that to happen. You don't want it to ever get loose. So you're going to look underneath here and see where you have a space where you can sort of hook that wire around. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to trim off and leave somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, just enough to make a little hook on the end. And then you're going to turn this over with your pliers, and I'll show you from the top down so you can see. See, we have that little fish hook in there. So what I want to do now is I want to press that underneath. Again, I'm going to try to get this where you can see it. So that right there is my little hook, and what I'm going to do is get it underneath these other wires. So use your pliers to go underneath, and the idea is to find a little space where this can curl around, so that if on the odd chance it were to catch on something, on clothing, whatever, hair, it's not going to pull out. And just press it in there until it's good and secure and it stays. Now, if it pops out through the other side, then you know you've cut it too long. You need to go back, pull it out, trim it off, try again. You don't want that to stick out. So it should be almost invisible. The idea at the end is to say, wow, where did the end of the wire go? Okay, then put your pencil back in so that you know you're maintaining your shape. And we're going to go with this piece, we're going the opposite direction. So now where you have gaps, sorry I fell off camera, now where you have gaps from the other piece, we're going to fill in. Now later on when we learn how to do a coil or a spiral, you could actually finish it that way and have a little coil at the top, but because we haven't learned that yet, we're going to finish this side exactly the same way. So we're going to trim it off. Look for a spot where it can grab on. Don't need that anymore. And again, you're going to turn this around in a little bit of a hook shape. Hopefully you can see my little hook. And we're going to just press it under. And then take some time to just adjust anything that doesn't look exactly the way you want it to look. Now that this is finished, I'm going to open it out a little bit because I like the look of these not being right on top of each other. And that is how you get a nice, tight, even wrap with your ends tucked in so they're not going to scratch anyone, they're not going to hurt anyone, and your piece is not going to come undone. Okay? Now, areas like this, you have, like I have a little gap here, so what I would do is I'm just going to take this and press it, not hard, please don't break the stone, please don't hurt your fingers, just gently roll it back and forth on the tabletop a little bit, and you can press those in that way. Now, these stones are odd shaped, so it's not going to lay extremely flat, and that's okay, it doesn't have to. When you get this far, you'll see that it's really secure. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to fall out. The stone's not moving. Quite honestly, if you do this wrap and, you know, at the end, if you take a hold of the bail of your wrap and you wiggle your stone and your stone is moving independently of your frame, of your wire, you probably should take it apart and try it again. And I know that's frustrating, but that's how we learn, is to do the same thing over and over and over again. You know, the other thing that you may be able to do, and I see a lot of this, is where you take your pliers and give your wire a twist like that. Now that's fine to do if you're just making adjustments. It won't hurt anything. It does tighten up your wire. But if you need that to hold your stone in place, then your wrap wasn't solid to begin with, and you probably should go another time. Try it again. And that's how that's done. It just takes a little patience. It takes some practice. It takes getting used to how the wire feels in your hands, how the wire works, what happens as the wire has been worked with and gets hardened up. And those are all things that you really can only learn by doing it over and over and over again. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wrap this rock without all the talking and without all the jabbering, and hopefully my little guy will be quiet in the background. He's playing games right now, and we can get through this. So for this one, because it's a bigger stone, I'll probably use about 18 inches of wire. I normally don't measure, and that's the beauty of copper wire, is that it's not real expensive, so give yourself some extra room. There's nothing more frustrating than when you get to the end of a piece and you're trying to finish it and you're out of wire, you don't have enough. Because then, you know, in terms of, if you're using, you know, if you're running yourself out of base wire, that's very difficult to add on, so you're kind of stuck at that point. So give yourself a little extra room, especially if you're not sure. You know, I mean, my stone that I started with, the citrine, was pretty small, so I only used 12 inches of wire, and you can see I really didn't have, but, you know, what is that, maybe 4 inches on one side and an inch on the other side. So it actually takes quite a bit of wire to do this wrap. So again, I'm just going to kind of measure where I want this to be. I'm not sure what I even was holding as the bottom here. That's alright, we'll see how it fits. And I think, excuse me, for this piece we're going to do, maybe I'll do a longer twist up the middle, just to see how it looks, show you a different option. Now this would be a cool spot, you know, later on in your wire journey. Maybe you want to add some beads. So this is a neat place to attach the beads and have just a few run right down the middle. Especially if you're using something like a beach rock like this, which is just, I don't know even what kind of rock this is. It's just a plain, like a river rock, probably granite. I don't know. I'm not real good with rock names. I do better with gem names. Those I recognize easier. And this is going to need a little fiddling around with at the bottom when we're finished. That's okay. Leave it be for now. It's not hurting anything. It just gives that rock a place to land. the other side looks like. So, I can tell right away by looking at this that this will be my back. I just don't like this side as much, which is fine. Doesn't really matter. So if I were going to put beads on it, I would put them on the opposite side. Okay, so he's already in there pretty tightly. I'll go back to this side. And that gets him settled in place. I don't know why this rock is a him. It just seems like it must be. Whatever. It. Do you personify your rocks? I do sometimes, especially if they're giving me a hard time. So now here's a case of these aren't exactly aligned at the top. So what I'm going to do is wrap this a few times. Now, one thing that I do want to mention to you, because I've actually done this to myself before, as you're twisting, you will find that if you go too tight for too long, you can actually snap this off. So you need to make sure when you're doing your twist that you're giving it enough space, okay? So you're actually going to back off a little bit each time that you twist, just a tiny bit. But if you try to make this twist too tiny and too tight, you'll snap it right off. And that's because as you work with the wire, it does work harden. So you have to be aware that that's a possibility. And this actually looks like it's going to be fine after all. So I'm going to go around with this one and around with the other one until we kind of get to the top. And I'm doing this all the same way that I did the first one. Just a quick version of it so you can see it on a different shape. Bend it to the back. Cross them over. Just feels safer to me to have that little cross in there. Okay, and then down, and this one's going to be really, really easy to tuck because there's actually lots of space. And I don't really care for the way that that looks too much with this little gap in here, so I'm just going to pinch it down a little further. Turn it under, give it a little hook. Pencil back in so you don't pull the bail out of shape. trim. And there he is. Now this bit at the bottom, we're going to sort of tell it where it needs to sit. And I'm going to adjust this wire right here. Now you can also put your twist right across the center of the bottom if you prefer that look, your first twist, rather than creating this gap. It's another way to do it. Actually, I did it on this one. It's just a little bit more difficult to balance as you start. Okay, so in order to keep things easy for you, I suggest you give that stone a little place to sit. And then as you do these, and you know what, go get some rocks out of your driveway and practice, or you know, whatever. If you don't have tumbled stones, you know, and you find these all over the place now in little metaphysical shops and stuff. So a lot of people are selling tumbled stones. I think I've even seen these at the dollar store in little bags. Not, obviously not citrine stones, but, you know, little glass blobs or little river rocks or whatever. Go get a bag of them for $1 and just sit and practice. Make these all day until you're confident, until you feel good about it. You know, I'm just going to stick a wire through here and see how it hangs. You can't see that because of the angle, but pretty well balanced. And if you draw a line down the center, you'll see that it's actually wider on this side. It comes out further, but the weight of it is pretty well distributed because this side has more on the top and more on the bottom. So that's what I mean by balance. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that lesson, and let me see what you made. If you have questions, if you have issues, if you're running into trouble, please let me know, and of course if I'm able to help you, I certainly will. Have a great day. Have fun with your rocks.